Can you imagine seeing Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, qualifying last on the grid for the first time in his entire career? And not because of his own mistake, but because his Ferrari simply didn't work? What happened in Las Vegas was a breaking point for Maranello. But what did Fred Vasseur really discover that has put the entire team in a state of emergency? Let's find out. The neon lights, artificial glamour, and expectation of an iconic race under skyscrapers could not hide the reality. Las Vegas was a technical and emotional hell for Ferrari, and in the center of that chaos, a Lewis Hamilton completely disconnected from his machine. A world champion, the most successful in the history of F1, finishing last in a classification. Not because of a piloting error, not because of an accident, but because his car just didn't respond. From the start of Q1, drama was in the air in the Maranello pit. Constant rain, cold asphalt, and an urban circuit with very little grip evolution. A lethal cocktail for any team, but a sentence for Ferrari. The extreme rain tires, the only ones possible in these conditions, became an insurmountable challenge for Hamilton. They never reached temperature. They never generated the minimum necessary grip. The SF25 skidded. Literally. The first installation laps were already a warning. While other drivers, with greater or lesser difficulty, managed to at least mark competitive sectors, Hamilton was completely off the pace. From the wall, Riccardo Adami was trying to guide the driver through the brake, balance, and differential adjustments, but nothing was working. The front tire temperature remained below the minimum operating threshold. That, in Formula One, is a death sentence in classification. The most shocking thing was the radio communication. They were not empty complaints. It was an emotional X-ray of a pilot who, for the first time, had no weapons to compete. "I can't get the tires going," he said in frustration. "This is the slipperiest I've ever felt," he continued, his voice already thick with disbelief. And finally, the phrase that summed it all up: "I can't see anything. I hit a bollard because I just couldn't see the curve." Words that are not heard from a debutante, much less from someone who has dominated the category for more than a decade. But this wasn't just a personal drama. What happened to Hamilton was the most visible reflection of a systemic failure. While Charles Leclerc managed to advance with suffering, but with a little more rhythm, the contrast was as painful as it was revealing. All things being equal, one of the two cars was completely uncontrollable. And that is not a hand problem, it is a machine problem. The session ended with Hamilton in 20th position, outside of Q1, with more than a second and a half difference compared to his teammate. No other driver seemed as disconnected from his car as he did. And when he got out of the car, he did so without words. The cameras focused on him silently, walking towards the back of the paddock, as if he knew there was something much more serious than a bad classification. As if he understood that this car was not made for real conditions. "I wasn't made to compete." And so, Las Vegas wasn't just a bad day. It was the public demonstration that Ferrari, despite its ambitions, had built a car that did not work in the real world. Because Formula One is not an ideal simulation in wind tunnels or CFD. It's rain, cold, traffic, pressure. And in all of that, the SF25 failed. And with it, Hamilton's dream began to crack before it even began. When chaos broke out in Las Vegas, it would have been easy to blame the weather, to the rain, to the urban track, or even opportunistically to Lewis Hamilton himself. But Fred Vasseur, Ferrari team principal, knew that what happened could not be a simple bad day. That classification was a red alert that triggered an unprecedented internal investigation within the Maranello team. In the hours following the disaster, Vasseur mobilized his technical staff to conduct a comprehensive analysis of the SF25. What they expected to find was an erroneous configuration, a specific decision that explained the collapse. What they discovered, however, was much more disturbing. This was not a setup error. It was a structural failure, a hidden weakness in the car's own architecture. The report was clear. The SF25 suffers from an extremely narrow tire operating window. In other words, the car only performs within such a limited range of temperatures and conditions that any deviation makes it uncontrollable. This results in a car that cannot warm its tires properly in cold weather, nor generate sufficient traction on wet tracks. It is a car that needs ideal conditions to function. And that, in modern Formula One, is a recipe for failure. The real trigger for this debacle began months before, with a key decision in the design philosophy. Ferrari opted for an ultra-aggressive ground effect aerodynamic platform. The SF25 was designed to run extremely low, with the goal of maximizing the downforce generated by the flat bottom. But this bet turned against them when the FIA, in the middle of the season, prohibited the use of certain additional plates on the bottom of the car. These plates were essential to protect the chassis without losing efficiency. Without them, Ferrari was left exposed. With the new regulations, Ferrari had to raise the height of the car. And that, for a design that depended on that proximity to the ground, was like amputating its wings. Losing that connection destroyed the aerodynamic balance, affected weight distribution, and decalibrated the suspension. It was like reconfiguring an airplane without redesigning its wings. Worse still, any attempt to tune the car to avoid penalties for flat bottom were compromised its competitiveness. Running low was illegal. Running high was useless. Fred Vasseur recognized it internally. The car is trapped in a paradox without a solution. If they adjust to meet the rules, they lose performance. If they adjust to perform, they risk penalties or breaking the bottom of the car. Hamilton's disqualification in China for excessive wear and tear was public confirmation of this dilemma. That's when the team understood it wasn't just about Las Vegas. It was the entire season that was at risk. Technical analyses also revealed that this fragility extends to the suspension. The front geometry, designed to work in narrow rebound and compression ranges, simply doesn't respond well to low-grip tracks. And in a calendar with more than half of its routes urban or low temperature, the SF-25 was condemned to fight uphill from the first traffic light. Even Charles Leclerc, a historically diplomatic pilot, described the emergency adjustments as really extreme. I knew the car had become unpredictable. I knew they were trying to extract performance from a machine with a faulty foundation. And that, for a team with Ferrari's aspirations, is devastating. Because it is not about correcting a data curve. It is about redesigning the backbone of an entire concept. The most alarming thing is that there is no simple solution. Ferrari cannot redesign the chassis in the middle of the season. You can't change the philosophy of the car without sacrificing the entire technical package. And meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton continues to adapt to a car that not even his own engineers fully understand. What happened in Las Vegas was, without a doubt, the emotional and technical breaking point of the year. But for Ferrari, that collapse was nothing more than the visible culmination of a season plagued by cumulative errors, poorly managed technical compromises, and a sequence of decisions that ended up trapping the team in a dead end. One thing became clear to those who follow Formula One closely. The SF-25 is not only an unstable car, it is a reflection of a team that has not yet resolved its internal contradictions. The central problem, as several paddock engineers revealed, is that the SF-25 depends on an extremely delicate configuration to perform. Everything must be perfectly aligned. Ideal track temperature, correct compound, exact tire pressure, and not a single irregularity in the asphalt surface. If even one of those factors deviates, the car becomes unstable, loses downforce, and worse still, prevents the drivers from building confidence. And if a driver doesn't trust his car, everything falls apart. This inability to adapt to changing conditions became Ferrari's Achilles heel. In a modern Formula One, where races are defined in margins of thousands and where climatic unpredictability is always present, not having a flexible car is equivalent to being condemned to mediocrity. And that, for a team like Ferrari with its history, its resources, and its ambition, is unacceptable. Today, with the championship already well underway, the Italian team not only faces a performance crisis, but also an identity crisis. What kind of team does Ferrari want to be? One that fights for occasional victories, or one that builds championships? Because for the second, you need much more than pure speed. You need technical consistency, strategic direction, and, above all, a car that works in any conditions, not just in perfect simulations. The 2025 season, which should have been a declaration of intent for Ferrari, has become an uncomfortable mirror. A reflection of what happens when ambitious design is not accompanied by adaptability, when talent behind the wheel is not enough, and when historical pressure outweighs the ability to evolve. What happened in Las Vegas was the strongest proof that the SF-25 is a broken car. Not only inefficient, but fundamentally incoherent with the current reality of Formula One. In a category where conditions change minute by minute, where rain, wind, traffic, and strategies are part of the usual script every Sunday, Ferrari built a car that can only perform if everything goes perfect. But in Formula One, perfection does not exist. There is only adaptation. And that is where Ferrari has failed miserably. The investigation led by Fred Vasseur not only revealed a technical error, it revealed a design philosophy that is completely disconnected from the competitive present. Everything was bet on one card: extreme ground effect, low ride height, maximum downforce. But in that desire, they forgot something essential: versatility. Because a car that is fast only in the wind tunnel is of no use on Sunday in the rain, when the points are at stake. Lewis Hamilton, signed as the emblem of a new beginning, is now in the middle of a storm that not even he can control. He is a 7-time world champion, yes, but he is also a driver who needs confidence, a feeling of control, tools to build rhythm. And Ferrari until now has not given it to them. They left him alone on a battlefield that was not prepared for him. And that, for a team of this caliber, cannot continue to happen. The real danger here is not just technical, but institutional. If Ferrari does not recognize the magnitude of the problem, if it does not make urgent structural, strategic and conceptual decisions, it runs the risk of repeating its most painful history. Decades of frustration, of half-finished projects, of wasted talent. And there's no guarantee that Hamilton or any other elite driver will be willing to wait that long. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.